That one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this edition, I wanted to start off our little Texas history segment with a discussion about the Runaway Scrape. So if y'all aren't aware of what this was, I'll get into that, but I want to set the stage here with letting you know kind of what was going on in Texas at this time. Or at the end of it. So in October of 1836 is when the chaos of the war of secession from Mexico kind of started waning as the Sam Houston administration replaces the ad interim government of Texas that existed during the independence months. So in 1836, October, the ad interim government ended with the inauguration of Sam Houston as president of the Republic of Texas. The Convention of 1836 had declared independence and framed a constitution for Texas, but the advance of the Mexican army made immediate ratification and establishment of constitutional government impossible. The last act of the convention was the selection of an ad interim government on March 16th, 1836. With David G. Burnett, president, Lorenzo de Zavala, vice president, Samuel P. Carson, secretary of state, Bailey Hardiman, secretary of treasury, Thomas J. Rusk, secretary of war, Robert Potter, secretary of the navy, and David Thomas, attorney general. This temporary government, without any legislative or judicial departments, fled with the people in the Runaway Scrape and was located successfully at Washington on the Brazos, Harrisburg, Galveston Island, Velasco, and Columbia. So what was the Runaway Scrape? Well, the term Runaway Scrape was the name Texans applied to the flight from their homes when Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna began his attempted conquest of Texas in February 1836. The first communities to be affected were those in the south-central portions of Texas around San Patricio, Refugio, and San Antonio. The people began to leave that area as early as January 14th, 1836, when the Mexicans were reported gathering on the Rio Grande. When Sam Houston arrived in Gonzales on March 11th and was informed of the fall of the Alamo, he decided upon retreat to the Colorado River and ordered all inhabitants to accompany him. Couriers were dispatched from Gonzales to carry the news of the fall of the Alamo, and when they received that news, people all over Texas began to leave everything and make their way to safety. Houston's retreat marked the beginning of the Runaway Scrape on a really large scale. Washington on the Brazos was deserted by March 17th, and about April 1st, Richmond was evacuated, as were the settlements on both sides of the Brazos River. The further retreat of Houston toward the Sabine left all of the settlements between the Colorado and the Brazos unprotected, and the settlers in that area at once began making their way toward Louisiana or Galveston Island. The section of East Texas around Nacogdoches and St. Augustine was abandoned a little prior to April 13th. The flight was marked by lack of preparation and by panic caused by fear both of the Mexican army and of the Indians. The people used any means of transportation or none at all. Added to the discomforts of travel were all kinds of diseases, intensified by cold, rain, and hunger. Many persons died and were buried where they fell. The flight continued until news came of the victory in the Battle of San Jacinto. At first, no credence was put in this news because so many false rumors had been circulated. But gradually, the refugees began to reverse their steps and turn back towards home, many towards homes that no longer existed. That's pretty impactful. And the Runaway Scrape is a monument in Texas history. I think a good example of the frustration that came with Sam Houston's strategy in the Runaway Scrape is in the latest edition of the movie, the latest Alamo edition, the one with let's see, Billy Bob Thornton as Davy Crockett, Randy Quaid, Sam Houston, where the army was getting really frustrated, and the folks with families in the scrape, basically, with the army, was getting very frustrated with constantly retreating. They just wanted to fight Santa Anna. And it's kind of cool, not to say this is what actually happened, but dramatically in the movie, when Sam Houston at San Jacinto walks out kind of onto the battlefield, and it's as if the field is talking to him and says, this is where Texas will be born. And then, of course, the movie plays out, but highly recommended movie to watch. Very good. All right. Now I wanted to jump into a little more whitetail strategies. Let's go and let's learn a little more about those old whitetail deer that we go out for every fall. So I'm going to further comment on the book Whitetail Strategies, a no-nonsense approach to successful deer hunting. And let's just go through here on chapter 2 and see what all about the whitetail. Just the mere mention of the name whitetail leads most to think about one of the deer's most recognizable physical characteristics, its large brown tail with its completely white underside. Many hunters and non-hunters alike have witnessed this graceful animal fleeing across an open field in a long, graceful bounds as it displayed the white underside of its tail held high in the air, swaying from side to side as the deer retreated to safety. As with most animals, specific physical traits are modified through the process of evolution to enhance the survival of the species. It is the external factors that generate changes in its physical evolution. The whitetail is no exception. The whitetail evolved into a graceful, fleet, alert deer that it is to overcome predation, climatic changes, and food source modifications. The deer also evolved its well-honed sense of eyesight, acute sense of smell, and its superbly camouflaged and thermoregulatory coat to aid in its attempt to survive. Even a buck's antlers have evolved to act as weapons against other competitive bucks, predators to some degree, and as a form of courtship to aid the buck with the visual attraction of females. All of these physical traits aid the deer in its attempt to survive predation, man or animal, climatic changes, and to perpetuate the species. The three most proclaimed physical characteristics of a deer is its eyes, ears, and nose. Each of these sensory organs is used daily by the whitetail for a profusion of reasons, including where to find its food sources, to locate and avoid danger, and to seek out the opposite sex during the breeding season. The eyes. Let's take a closer look at all three of these sensory organs, beginning with the deer's eyes. A whitetail's eyes contain more rods than cones, allowing for better nighttime vision. A whitetail's eye only needs 1/8 of the available light a human's eye needs to see in the dark. The white hair, which lies directly under the eyes of the whitetail, also help it see better at night. The white hair reflects as much light that it is available during low light situations. Unbelievably, whitetails can see at least 310 degrees of a full circle, 360 degrees, and at least 50 degrees of the 310 degrees can be seen in binocular vision. Whitetails have evolved to detect motion and depth perception. The eyes of a deer have both monocular vision to each eye and binocular vision to the front, giving the deer a wide field of view. The design of the orbit, the bony socket in which the eye lies, and the size of the retina, the sensory membrane that lines the eye and is connected to the brain by the optic nerve, allow all ruminant animals, those animals that are cud chewers and have 3 or 4 chambered complex stomachs, to see back along their flanks and to also detect objects behind them. Although for years it has been said that the deer are colorblind, recent research now suggests that deer can see shades of color. This research is based on the fact that animals that are predominantly active at night have eyes that are dormant with light-sensitive rods. To the contrary, animals active during daylight have eyes principally made up of color-sensitive cones. In fact, one of the most controversial subjects regarding a deer's eyesight has also revolved around its ability to detect ultraviolet light. I strongly believe deer do see shades of color. I have come to the conclusion not from a scientific basis, but rather through 30 years of hunting and observing whitetails. I find the UV argument hard to swallow, however. I guess this is a good time as any in this book to explain to you why I feel this way. Over the last few years, the subject of ultraviolet light and how animals see it has received significant attention within the hunting fraternity. Many hunters are concerned about the effect ultraviolet light has on untreated hunting clothing under low light conditions. The information about UV light in articles and in other forms of media is packed with technical looking information and misleading graphs detailing how animals, and particularly deer, are able to detect hunters when they wear untreated hunting garments, including blaze orange and camo clothing. Although these articles strongly suggest deer do see UV light and colors, exactly how animals interpret UV in the spectrum of colors is very debatable. For instance, in an article I read about UV light, the article began by stating, "Laboratory experiments prove that deer see many things we cannot see, especially ultraviolet light at the blue-white end of the color spectrum. As far as I know, from my involvement in videography and photography, white is not a color and is not on the spectrum." Just an aside, from what I remember, white is all colors. So, yes, technically white is not an individual color, but it is all colors. It is the spectrum, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of what I remember, and black being the absence of all color. I digress. The question is, are animals, especially deer, able to pinpoint and react negatively to ultraviolet light being reflected from hunters' garments? It is true that most nocturnal animals are able to see as good in the dark as they can during the daylight hours. Because of several factors, they are able to see better in total darkness, and supposedly best under low light conditions, which is when I see worst, especially after I had LASIK. Firstly, when the sun sets, a game animal's pupil opens wider to admit more light. Unlike humans, who only have cones within the central region of their eyes, deer's eyes contain both rods and cones. The rods, which are dominant within the deer's eye, are extremely sensitive to light, moreover dim light. In addition, human eyes have a filter that blocks out UV light, where deer do not have this filter present in their eyes. But the question remains, can deer and other game animals detect enough ultraviolet light reflected from camo clothing worn by hunters from dusk to dawn to dusk that will require sportsmen to change their hunting strategies? Some people think so. Kurt von Besser is the manufacturer of a product called UV Killer by Atsko Snow Seal Inc. Von Besser was the first to address the issue of UV light in clothing. In his booklet, How Game Animals See, von Besser supports his findings of how game animals see through research compiled by a vision scientist at the University of California. According to von Besser, hunters who wear camo clothing manufactured with or which have been enhanced by UV brighteners are using camo which has been working against them. He feels that the amount of ultraviolet light reflected from clothing is detected by game to an extent which gives the hunter away and spooks the game. Thus, with his UV Killer, which is actually another dye to neutralize brighteners in clothing, Sportsmen can eliminate UV reflection from their clothing and have fewer game detect them. If this is the case, where do the ultraviolet brighteners come from? They come from standard detergents used to wash clothing. Therefore, if a sportsman washes his clothes in regular detergent, there's a greater chance his detergent has ultraviolet brighteners in it. However, for the last 15 to 20 years, much has been written about scent and how sportsmen should wash their clothing in a non-scented detergent or brown soap. Most of these hunter soaps contain basic cleaning agents, free from ultraviolet brighteners. Hunters who use these soaps, therefore, should be wearing camo clothing safe from UV brighteners anyway. In addition, because of the UV controversy, some leading manufacturers of camouflage clothing have had to take steps to comply with the public awareness of this new scientific breakthrough. And although most clothing manufacturers do not agree with theories revolving around the UV range, they are spending time and money to assure the public their clothing does not contain any UV brighteners. According to the leading manufacturers, most camo clothing fabric houses do not use ultraviolet brighteners in their dyes. In a conversation with Bill Jordan from Spartan Realtree, he stated, "All cotton fabrics used in Realtree clothing actually do not contain any optical brighteners." Jordan is a longtime whitetail deer hunter. In addition, Jim Crumley from Tree Bark told me, "There are no brighteners used in the ink dyes of tree bark fabrics." Crumley has been a successful turkey hunter for many years. So what are the facts? The ability of deer to detect and react to UV light reflected from clothing seems to be greatly exaggerated. Leading scientists who are involved in extensive visionary research do not support the claims that animals, especially mammals, detect UV light as being brighter than any other light they see. They all agree that since no documented research using accepted psychophysiological methods specifically for deer has been performed regarding deer's ability to detect UV light, little can be said to prove they can detect UV reflection from clothes. John Colborn, president of Colborn Instruments Megabucks Trophy Nutritional Products, who holds a degree in behavioral psychology and zoology, states the following: "The notion that deer see ultraviolet wavelengths with significantly greater sensitivity than other mammals, including humans, is unlikely." Colborn feels the pictures displayed in the advertisements and articles are pointless. No organism with a single lens eye could simultaneously focus on red and green and ultraviolet, which the pictures portray. Either it would see an ultraviolet image in a blurred red-green haze or the reverse. Not being able to focus on an image or even detect target movement in this region of the spectrum means evolution would not select for this capability, said Colborn. In addition, the graph by Von Besser depicting how game animals see is, quote, "without labeled vertical axis and supporting data or reference. It is totally unsupported. Furthermore, the graph seems to have a fabricated curve because its shape implies that there's another unknown photoreceptor within its peak at or below 300 millimicron. Such a major discovery would have set the visual research community on its ear." End quote. Colborn Instruments is primarily involved in manufacturing behavioral and physiological test instruments for drug and toxicology research. Having completed extensive studies regarding vision in animals, Colborn included mammals, in fact most vertebrates, which have color sensitivity, are similar to humans, and any deviations from our green-centered sensitivity tends to be the far red, the opposite end of the spectrum from violet. This is especially true for nocturnal active animals. Colborn explained how deer's vision is different from our own. While we, quote, "while we concentrate on image formation and pattern form discrimination, deer are more responsive to movement or target velocity across the retina. This is a common adaptation in prey animals, which are attacked by swiftly moving predators," end quote. Dr. Silas D. White, professor of psychology at Muhlenberg College, finds that the concept of deer being able to detect clear images from ultraviolet reflection difficult to believe. Dr. White explained, in quote, "invertebrate studies performed thus far, in no case does there appear to be much, if any, sensitivity to radiant energy in the UV end of the spectrum. This militates strongly against UV reflections being perceived as brighter than other wavelengths." End quote. Because UV light has such a short wavelength that it is extremely unlikely deer can detect a clearly focused image of a UV reflection. It is unlikely that if UV were indeed an adequate stimulus, which is doubtful, deer or humans would be capable of perceiving a crisp image resulting from reflections of such disparate wavelengths as those in the typical deer wood's background in UV reflections. In addition to the above, consider Colburn's point that nature has evolved all animals that are predated upon with vision that is super sensitive to motion rather than color. For instance, a rabbit who is feeding with eyes focused down is able to instantly detect a hawk approaching simply by having the hawk's shadow trigger an instinctive response. It instantly reacts by hunkering down, pinning its ears back, and darting off. Similarly, a deer reacts much the same way when it sees something that visually suggests a problem. As hunters, we have all had this experience. The deer either stands still and remains motionless or approaches cautiously. With a single movement from the subject, however, the deer flees. My point is that deer's eyes have not evolved to react to color, but rather, as an animal that is predated upon by man and other animals, their eyes have evolved to detect movement. And it is not only scientists outside of the hunting fraternity having doubts about the so-called revolutionary findings. Several seasoned outdoor professionals don't think deer can interpret reflections from UV light either. Glenn Cole, a wildlife manager in Region Number 3 for the New York Department of Environmental Conservation, has hunted white-tailed deer for over 20 years. He expressed his thoughts about deer detecting UV light reflected from clothing this way, quote, "The hard facts to support what an animal does or does not see under low light conditions are just not available. All the scientific literature I have read says deer see in shades of gray. I've not seen any scientific material to the contrary. I can honestly say that any deer that is spooked from seeing me reacted to movement or scent, and not because my camo clothing was reflecting UV light." Well, I mean, yeah, but you can't prove that. Anyway, game calling expert and avid hunter Brad Harris from Lohman Game Call Company said, "I do not feel that I am qualified to say whether UV killer is a benefit or not. I've heard many discussions for and against this product. I can say that over the past 10 years, I've made my living calling game animals. I've had my birds and wild game, such as deer, elk, predators, turkey, and small game, within a matter of just a few feet on one or more occasions than I care to count." Quote, unquote. He attributes getting close to game by knowing the animal's habits and being properly concealed with a good backdrop to break up my image. In my personal experience, which includes harvesting 113 whitetail bucks, as well as photographing and videotaping many game animals up close, I can honestly say, to the best of my knowledge, I've never had an animal become frightened or run away because it spotted UV light reflected from my clothing. In fact, I have had on many occasions the opposite effects, where deer approach me. Over the years, I have done intensive field research with whitetails in the wild and at game farms. One such preserve, Davenport Game Farm, is a 250-acre enclosure deer research facility owned and managed by Stephen Novotny. While conducting my research, it has been my experience that the overwhelming majority of the deer that I have spooked, either in the wild or under controlled conditions, occurred from the deer either winding my scent or detecting my movement. To support this point, think about your own hunting experiences. How many times have you had deer or other game animals very close to you while wearing untreated hunting clothing? What about the deer who stared you down, trying to decipher what it was looking at, and after many moments of staring, decided that what it saw was not a threat and either began to feed or calmly walked away undisturbed? If it detected it glowing, would the deer have remained within the area? My point is, too many hunters have had too many of these exciting close encounters over the years to suggest that deer are frightened from possible problems from UV light being reflected from our clothing. Other than eliminating human scent, camouflage has been the second most important factor in getting me closer to deer, undetected. I have harvested and videotaped bucks while they were staring directly at me, unable to decipher what they were looking at. Over the years, many of my hunting companions have told me of their experiences of deer coming within touching distance of them while wearing untreated camouflage clothing. All this hard evidence clearly indicates that the UV issue related to deer hunting is primarily designed to sell product. So to summarize, many seasoned outdoor professionals, biologists, scientists, and plain everyday hunters are skeptical about the subject of UV light and how it supposedly scares deer. Until there is more viable and conclusive evidence about how deer react to ultraviolet light, reflected from the camo clothing and its effect on our hunting, there can be no emphatic statement made about the subject. The answer lies in trial and error and in documented long-term research conducted with deer. I intend to continue hunting in untreated clothing, not because I want to continue to prove the UV theory wrong, but because I don't want to change my long-time winning formula. Until the time comes when all the facts and figures are gathered and carefully analyzed and evaluated, it seems to me, and many other folks, that the UV reflection issue is mostly bogus. What is most important to remember is a deer's eyes are designed, because it is an animal that is predated upon, to pick up the slightest movements. Keep that fact uppermost in your mind, and you will not have to worry about UV. That's a good point. Be still. Obviously, sit in a deer blind if you can. And don't move around too much, depending on how high up you are in the deer blind. And of course, you have the scent issue. Let's continue here. All right, the ears. So this brings us to our next sensory organ, the deer's ears. The whitetail's ears are quite sensitive and respond to unusual sounds immediately. Each ear has about 24 square inches of surface in which sounds are able to glance off. They use their ears constantly in a radar-like swivel fashion to aid them in determining if anything unfamiliar is occurring in their surroundings and to monitor the whereabouts and the behavior of other animals that share their domain, especially predators. By closely observing how the whitetail holds its ears, you will be able to tell what the deer is thinking and what it's about to do. I will cover this more in Chapter 10 on body language. Okay, can't wait to get to Chapter 10. That'll be interesting. The nose. Their sense of smell is their number one defense system. Each nostril is lined with epithelium and membranous cellular tissue, which is composed of mucous membranes and sensory nerve endings. Kept moist by the deer's tongue and the internal tissue itself, the epithelium of the nose can pick up odors much better. The nose also aids them in defining exactly who's who individually in the deer world. A whitetail also uses its nose not only to locate its food, but also to determine if it's going to be palatable enough to eat. Of course, it is used ultimately to detect danger and to locate a receptive doe in estrus. In an upcoming chapter, I will cover the deer's sense of smell in more detail. Did you know a deer's body temperature is about 104 degrees Fahrenheit? That I did not know. Interesting. I believe, bar nothing, the deer's sense of smell is its key to survival and a hunter's key to success in bagging whitetails consistently. You will hear me repeat throughout this book a couple of phrases. The first and the one you should never forget and that you can, quote, take to the deer hunting bank is this. In order to be a consistently successful deer hunter, bust the buck's ability to use its nose against you, and you will bust the buck. The amount of membranous cellular tissue which lines the nostrils found in man is about 1/8,000th of the skin's total surface, and about 1/80th of the skin's total surface in deer, which is the same as found in a dog. Obviously, because deer's nose has more epithelial membrane tissue than a human's, in proportion to total skin surface, it is much more capable of sensing the slightest of odors. Although deer can detect odors from as far as 3/4 of a mile or more, by the time the olfactory sensory organs pick up the scent, it is dispersed enough not to make a significant impact on the deer. Many biologists agree that a whitetail has to be no more than 50 to 100 yards away from a source of a scent to react one way or another. Of course, these figures are altered by wind currents to some degree. Next, we'll talk about the stomach. I had to get a little drink of water there. All right. As I mentioned, the whitetail is a ruminant, which simply means it has a 4-chambered stomach. Each of these chambers are shaped differently and have different linings. In addition, each compartment is capable of only holding a certain amount of food and serves a different and a specific function. The large pouch or compartment, which lies on top of the intestines, is the rumen. Its primary function is to store the deer's unchewed food. It holds about 2 gallons of material. The rumen allows the deer to quickly swallow the food it eats in large chunks. When a deer is eating, its head is down, which does not allow for the deer to see as well. In this particular feeding position, the deer is more vulnerable to predators. But being a ruminant, the deer can gather its food quickly and retreat to a safe area of cover, a useful and practical gift of the evolutionary process from Mother Nature. Once in a secure area, the deer brings the food back up into its mouth again and chews it more thoroughly. This is known as cud chewing. The rumen is a digestive or fermentation compartment of the stomach unique to ruminants. It acts as a holding area for unchewed food. Fatty acids then ferment the food, which the deer regurgitates to chew and then reswallows. The rumen consists of small papillae varying from 3/8 to 1/2 inch in length. Papillae look very similar to small links of spaghetti. There are about 1,600 papillae to the square inch. The second compartment of the deer's stomach is known as a reticulum. It looks very similar to a honeycomb. The reticulum forces liquid into the rumen, deferring small food particles, which are carried back to this compartment and then onto the third chamber called the omasum. The reticulum is about the size of a large orange. The omasum primarily serves as a dehydrator. It removes excess water from the food. This section has about 45 to 50 flaps of different sizes, which strain the food as it passes through. This is the compartment where digestion really begins to take place before moving on to the fourth compartment, called the abomasum. The abomasum secretes digestive enzymes and is the final area where digestion takes place for the deer. The abomasum is similar to the stomach of non-ruminants in that it is smooth and sleek, with about 60 to 70 feet of intestines. This is where all non-absorbed foods are then prepared to be passed out in the form of excrement, or deer dung. The entire digestive process can take about 24 to 36 hours for food to be eaten and then passed out as dung in an adult deer. Yeah, the stomachs, you know what they smell like if you've ever done unfortunately, a terrible stomach shot, or if one of your buddies may have had a little too much to drink and as you're cleaning your deer thought it'd be funny to stick a knife in there and make you gag from the smell. Oh, geez. Hope that's never happened to you. Other body information. This chapter would not be complete without the following statistical information and biological facts about the white-tailed deer that every dedicated deer hunter should know. The tail. On a northern whitetail, the overall tail length is about 12 inches from its rump to the end of its tail. When spread, the tail hairs on the underside of the tail can reach 10 to 12 inches wide. When a doe holds her tail straight out and off to one side, she's visually signaling that she is now ready to accept the advances of an accompanying buck. Okay. Hunters who observe does exhibiting this type of tail flagging behavior should keep a keen eye open for a trailing buck. Seldom will a doe showing this ready tail signal have a buck far behind her. I use this behavior as a decoy tactic, which I will explain more about in the decoy chapter. The hooves. The deer's feet are actually 2 extended toenails. The whitetail's prehistoric ancestors had 5 toes on each foot. Over time, that would be weird looking. Over time, this proved to be disadvantageous for the deer. It hindered the deer's ability to run fast enough to escape their enemies. So once again, Mother Nature stepped in, and through the process of evolution, the other 3 toes changed. The first toe completely vanished. The other 2 slowly began to regress or atrophy. Today, we see them as dew claws. The 2 remaining toes have slowly developed into the 2 main toenails or hoofs that we see on the modern-day deer of today. The whitetail's hoof has also evolved into a highly efficient foot for the firm type of surfaces of woods, fields, and the like. However, it's not very functional at all on ice surfaces like a frozen lake or pond. Once a deer falls on ice, it may never be able to regain its footing. In fact, many deer have died from exhaustion after falling on ice and not being able to recover their balance quickly. The deer's hoof is also used as a protective weapon. Both bucks and does use their hoofs to fend off predators. The deer stands on its hind legs and in an aggressive manner flails out its forelegs and strikes the intruder. The blow is powerful enough to crush the skull of a wolf, coyote, or domestic dog. Wow. If the deer fails to connect with the head, just a glancing blow to the body could inflict a tearing, deep wound into the flesh of its adversary. Does usually use this form of antagonistic behavior with other deer only when all other types of aggressive body language and vocalizations and other more docile foreleg kick have failed to get the desired results. That is funny to see in the wild, though, when they kind of go at it like they're boxing in a ring. Much has been written and said about the deer's hooves. Some argue that a hunter can tell the difference between a buck and a doe by the size of its hooves, by its tracks, or by the distance between each track. When it comes to identifying a buck from a doe by how deep the track is in the ground, the track size and shape, or the distance left between tracks, remember this: information left by deer tracks is all relative. There are no absolutes or positives about what a hunter can or cannot tell from tracks. Not unless you see the deer who is in the tracks at the time. Here are some basic facts about hooves and the tracks they leave. A deer's front hooves are usually larger than the rear hooves. Deer are also knock-kneed. This fact accounts for why outside of the hoof is most often larger than the inside of the hoof on each foot. Deer are inclined to walk on the inside lobe or toenail more often, accounting for this unique angle when we see when we look at tracks left by deer. Much has also been written and argued about the size of a deer's tracks. Old-timers, as well as some so-called experts, emphatically state that a hunter can identify the sex of a deer by its tracks alone. I've never seen either prove their abilities to me about this subject with any consistent success. They go on to say that a buck will leave deeper, wider tracks, that the buck track will have a rounded hoof, and that the angle of the track also is specific to whether it was left by a buck or doe. At the risk of sounding righteous, this is pure nonsense. The only absolute way, notice I said absolute, to determine whether a buck or doe left a particular track is to see the deer standing in the track itself. Take that fact to the deer hunting bank. Many mature older does can attain large body weights, especially in states where does are protected during hunting season. These old females leave deep tracks with rounded lobes that are often associated with buck tracks. Remember, throughout the country, most bucks, a majority in fact, are shot before they reach 2.5 years of age. Wow, that I did not know. Very interesting. Most does are much older than that before they are shot, if they're even hunted at all. In my home state of New York, does that reside within the northern region of our state? Does that reside within the northern region of our state are protected from hunting because the population density in this region has been traditionally lower than the western or southern portions of the state. Does in the northern region often reach live weights of 140 to 170 pounds. It is okay to speculate about a track belonging to a buck as long as you're practical about it and remember that it is only a conjecture at best. That way, after you have followed a buck track for miles over hill and dill for 8 hours, and it turns out when you catch up with the deer as it's making the tracks you're following, it turns out to be a doe, you're more ready to accept this misjudgment you made without frustration. One of the only halfway reliable track indications I know of is usually visible after a light snowfall of 1 or 2 inches. In this instance, the buck's hoof tracks are accompanied by a drag mark of several inches, a light snowfall of 1 to 2 inches. That just clicked in my mind. I'd say, well, down here in South Texas, that would be a massive snowfall if it were ever to occur again. Traditionally, a doe will pick up its feet, clear the snow, and just leave the hoof track itself. A point to remember, especially for novices, button bucks, spikes, and mature bucks all leave drag marks. Size of the track becomes an important factor here. If you follow a track with a drag mark, thinking you have definitely found an antlered buck, you may discover you've been following a button buck or a yearling spike, which may not be the buck you'd hoped he was going to be regarding the size of his antlers. After hunting whitetails for 31 years, I could tell you that if you absolutely depend on a track to indicate the sex of a deer that left it, you're making your deer hunting more difficult than it has to be. And you're not hunting with good old common sense on your side. Common sense is a major relevant factor to consistent deer hunting success. One other fact about the subject, a whitetail's walking stride, which is calculated at a steady walk of about 3.5 to 4 miles per hour, which is just a little faster than man's, is 18 to 19 inches. Their trotting gait, which is a speed of about 10 to 12 miles an hour, is 30 to 36 inches. The coat. A whitetail's coat comes in many different shades and in a few instances even different color phases. Different shades of the coat are mostly dependent upon in what section of the country the whitetail lives. Changes in their primary color, such as melanism, meaning all black, or piebalds, patches of white and brown, or all white with brown eyes, or albinism, all white with pink eyes, are hereditary. In general, the overall color of a deer's average coat is made up of black, a few different shades of brown, and white hairs. The deer's coat is an evolutionary thermoregulatory marvel. In summer, the whitetail's coat is reddish in color and is made up of solid, straight, thin hairs with no undercoat. Although the thin coat helps to keep the deer cool during the heat of summer, the downside is the thinness of the coat offers little protection from insects, allowing the pests to easily bite through it. Interestingly, however, the summer coat of a whitetail is compiled with more hairs per square inch than a winter coat. That is interesting. To the contrary, the hair of the winter undercoat is soft, thin, and kinky. The upper coat is hollow, longer, and thicker, with each hollow hair filled with air cells, offering the whitetail 2 layers of superb insulation. Confirmation of just how good the winter coat insulates the deer can be found by watching a deer during a snowstorm or on a frosty morning. In each case, the deer's coat will not melt the frost or snow that is accumulated on its back, verifying how little body heat the whitetail actually loses through the top of its coat. That's a good point. If their body heat is about 104 degrees and it's not melting stuff off, well, nothing's getting through. Any hunter who's ever seen where a deer has previously bedded down in the snow can attest to the fact that the snow in the bed has melted. It does so because any heat that has escaped is trapped by the snow beneath the animal and earth. However, snow falling on any other part of the upper body will not melt as long as the deer keeps its hair standing on end. When the hair is laid flat against the body, snow will melt rapidly on the deer. Interestingly, the hair on the front of the chest, the brisket, points forward while all other hair on the whitetail is directed back or down. It is also important for hunters to know that on different sections of the whitetail's body, the hair is of different color and texture. I've used this hair color and texture information many times in determining exactly where I shot a whitetail that ran off, especially when I'm bow hunting. The color or colors of the hair will give insight to what part of the body it came from. For instance, hair falling from the lung area will be coarse and brown, and it will not have black tips. Hair from around the kidney area will be long, dark, and brown, and sometimes it will have black tips. Knowing how to identify what hairs come from what portions of a deer's body is critical when tracking wounded deer. Through hair identification, you can determine more accurately just about where on the body you hit the deer. This will also give you a clue to what type of blood trail to expect and how long to wait or not wait before going after the animal. It should also give you a good idea about how far the deer should travel before expiring from its wound. All very important information in the recovery of a deer which ran off after being shot, especially for archers. Let's see, I believe, so that's the end of that chapter, and it ends with use common sense when deer hunting. The most successful whitetail hunters constantly apply heavy doses of good old common sense about deer to their deer hunting strategies. Well, that's true. I would say that's true for most everything in life, no? But yeah, as far as like nothing worse than a deer running off, and then you have the agonizing wait. You know, you give it, depending on where you think you hit it, 30 minutes, an hour at least before you go chase after it, because there's nothing worse than getting out too early, walking up on the deer thinking it was dead, you spooking it and it getting off and running off. It's the most demoralizing situation. So, number one, make a great shot, put it down at first. Number two, maybe study up a little more on the different colors of deer, the different hair colors, as this guy was talking about in this book, so that when you walk up to where you shot the deer, you look at that hair and you say, oh, okay, I got him in the lung, so it shouldn't be long. Or, oh dear, I got him it's a gut shot, so I'm going to have to wait, or whatever the case may be. But I hope you found all those all that information about the biology about the deer interesting. The parts of the deer, the eyes, the ears, etc. I know I learned some stuff in there that kind of gives me better insight into the deer as an animal. So I hope you enjoyed that. We'll keep going through this book as the weeks go on, the months go on. We got deer season. It's, as I'm recording this, it's end of October. When you hear this, it may be early November. So everyone will be out there full bore, full throttle, going after those whitetails. So it's exciting. It's going to be an exciting year. Can't wait to hear about how everyone's hunting season is going, etc. And I wish everybody the best of luck when they're out in the field. I hope to see you on the next podcast, and I will talk to you then. All right, thank you. Take care.
Well, I hope the bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Ana. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.